Talks. This edition, we're excited about our guest, Nina Leonhardt, the acting executive director of the Long Island Pine Barrens. And if you live on Long Island, you know how important the Long Island Pine Barrens is. I'm going to start off with this question because I thought about this all morning. I said, what if you didn't exist? Literally, what would happen if the Pine Barren Society didn't exist? Because Long Island is full of opportunists that want to keep building, and I can't imagine that. Bring me into that thought, if it's not a nightmare.
It is a nightmare, but it's a very important one that we confront every day. So thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for asking about that very important question. It was the society that was most active in making sure that we preserved the Central Pine Barrens. And that was accomplished through major litigation and legislative efforts over a period of about 4 years. And by bringing in developers as well as environmentalists and other business leaders and legislators, we were able to put together a plan that everybody accepted. So when we lost in court initially and were told to get legislative approval, what we did was work with this group and be able to put together a legislation that the New York State Legislature approved unanimously, which is unbelievable.
It's incredible.
And if that hadn't happened, we would have been paved over because there were 234 development projects on the line at the time.
What year is this?
It was 1989. It was the 1989 to 94, 95. We worked everything out. But before that, there were 3 young men who in 1977 were out riding their bikes and exploring Long Island like a lot of us who were native to this area did. And they were wise enough to look at the area around them and form a society. We're talking about teenagers. Formed a society, and they started educating people about what they found in the Pine Barrens. So it wasn't until 10 years later that other people got involved. Everyone knows Dick Amper, and
yes.
So he got involved at that point, and then we began our legal actions as necessary.
Where were the high school students from? Were they science students?
They were high school students who took science. Well, you take science in high school.
I mean, did they go on later on to were they more sort of positioned to be scientists in the future, or were they just really interested in the environment? Which high school students, back in, I don't know, I wasn't that interested. I was in the Pine Barrens building forts and things like that, but this is great fortitude.
Yes, it is. And I was a little older than them, and I did similar things, but I did not look forward. I was not that forward-thinking to create a society. I collected specimens, and I raised specimens at home, much to my mother's chagrin. But I did that. But they went the next step, and they really have to be congratulated for that.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Coram, and those backwoods that I remember growing up in, I do remember, like 90% pines, to be honest, or what felt like pine trees and pine needles all the time. How is it known that, you have the specimens, as you call them, and nature and animals and biosphere, but the reality is it's our drinking water that's under this. How is this brought out, and how is it communicated how important it is, which now we just see it just seems so natural.
Yeah, well, let's go back to your previous question. So these young men, as well as myself, we grew up further west, but we did call it going out into the woods for the day.
Right.
I don't know if you use that language, but that's what we said.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were from the Comac, Smithtown area.
Okay.
What did they become? One became a scientist but worked for government. There is a but, because you're limited when you work for government. And the other 2 became science educators and advocates.
Meant to be.
Yeah, meant to be. And I sort of went that route myself, a science educator. STEM is the word today. STEM educator. So, the water question was always apparent, but we didn't realize how important it would be to convey that to the public until Dick became involved. Because we're looking at specimens and collecting things, and I didn't know the founders at that point. Everyone's doing their own thing, and we were interested in educating people. But what are we educating them about? This moth that some people are interested in, other people are not.
Mm-hmm.
And the topography of Long Island is such that we only have one source of drinking water, and that's beneath our feet. And people had to learn about that. So once we started informing people about the aquifer and the layers of the aquifer, and it's our sole source of drinking water, then that became a natural thing to include. Now, interestingly, at that point, I was teaching a graduate course at Stony Brook, and one of the topics was water. And I was introducing the concept of the aquifer to my students, my graduate students at that time. And so the public was totally unaware. Totally unaware. So now people do understand that the aquifer, there's something under the ground, and that's where our drinking water is from, and we have to protect it.
And done right, the water would be, not to get too technical, it would be filtered through the years and then be reused. And the problem, as I understand it, is with just regular living and or overbuilding is our problem is nitrogen getting into this water, correct? I know there's more complicated than that.
Okay, one of the things I do really well is explain something complicated in the scientific world in a simple fashion so that everyone can understand it, which is what we want. If you don't explain things to people, they don't see the importance. So it's very important that we get out of our shells and our jargon and make sure everyone understands.
Yes, it is.
So basically, when it rains or snows, the water falls to the ground and percolates through the soil. And it just so happens in the Pine Barrens, it's a type of soil that allows for that percolation. And it's like pores. So the percolation through the pores allows for that filtration to take place. Now, there are 3 layers of the aquifer system. And so you don't get to drink the water that fell yesterday. It takes a long time. And right now, we're basically working with the Magathy layer, which is the largest one. It's the second one.
Okay.
And that's where we are. But if we don't capture that rainwater through percolation, and you can only do that if the ground is bare, if it's not developed. We can have pine trees on it, but we can't have it paved over because then there isn't any percolation, and we get something called runoff. Now, through daily living, as you pointed out, yes, what do we do on Long Island? Not only do we use the toilet, which is an obvious thing, but we have this need to have green lawns.
Oh.
And so we use fertilizers. Not good. So between fertilization and the nitrogen that results from the daily living in the house, you have this accumulation that will eventually enter into the aquifer and also our surface waters, and which include not only rivers and streams and ponds that are natural, but also our bays and the ocean and so forth. So we really want to limit that nitrogen. It's so important that we limit it. And how can we? When people hear that in Suffolk County there are still 360,000 individual cesspool and septic systems, they're appalled. I mean, we're not that far from New York City. And I've had colleagues from other parts of not only the country, the world, say to me, what?
Wow. So 1/3 of a million cesspools are still active.
Mm-hmm.
Is this part of your advocacy to help legislators to make laws to change that? Or is it not that simple because, for example, it takes tens of millions of dollars for sewer systems that have happened elsewhere west that haven't happened here yet? Or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. So first off, by preserving the Pine Barrens, we preserve that open space where the percolation can take place and keep enriching the aquifer. So that's really important. And then the second step is to limit any contamination of the aquifer. So if we attack nitrogen first, what can we do? And so we have advocated for the innovative alternative cesspool systems, which are expensive, but we also advocated for the statewide grants. So the state provides some money to the homeowner, and thereby when they have to replace their cesspool, which they only have to do if it's failing or if they do a major renovation of the home. People think that the government is coming in and saying everyone has to.
Oh, gotcha.
You don't have to right now. It's only if you have a problem. So that the
But
cost,
eventually everybody will have a problem, and we
right.
actually want that.
Right. The
Yep.
cost is mitigated by these grants that they're given. So that's one thing that we've advocated for. The other thing we've advocated for a long time now is some type of a continuing revenue stream that would allow and make sure that there's enough money for those grants and the changeover, and also for sewers in places where it makes sense. Like here in Port Jefferson, it's a dense area, a lot of stores and businesses and homes in an area where maybe you could do that.
And a lot of opportunity for runoff, negative runoff.
Negative runoff, yes. The runoff, as I alluded to before, and thank you for bringing that up again, your animals defecate, and they have the same nitrogen input that
Sure.
we do, or output. And any other waste that's on the streets and so forth, yes, that runs right in. Now, you were just inundated a few weeks ago with the storm, and every time that happens, these things are picked up and pulled out. So sewer systems in our towns and villages, where appropriate, would be wonderful. And that is the case further west. Now, you still have to deal with the waste products, but there are different treatment systems.
Right.
There are tertiary systems so that they really break things down, and then the outflow is out into the open waters.
Gotcha. Going back to what I said, this nightmare if you didn't exist as society, I know in the past, I can't say particularly when, but I remember voting and on the ballot for monies to buy land. And I think that's done, I thought we were going to talk for 10 minutes here. We're not talking for 10 minutes. Let's get that straight. Because I find it so interesting. Correct me if I'm wrong, you're working with developers to trade what they call, and you'll give me the word for it, I forget what it's called, but aren't you raising money ultimately to preserve land, or at least getting county government, Suffolk County government, to have the ability to buy land to preserve? Or are we getting too little outside of what your purview is?
No, that's exactly what we do. Basically, if there's a farmer who's in the Pine Barrens, or a landowner in the Pine Barrens, and they want to sell, and they're interested in selling, it's not much we can do if they're not, because we can't do a taking.
That's right.
That's illegal.
Eminent domain you can't do.
Eminent domain we could do.
You could do, okay.
But that has to have pure public benefit.
Okay.
But just simply taking because it's a lot in the Pine Barrens, no, we can't do that.
Okay.
And instead, there's this transfer of development rights.
That's the word. Right.
And so somebody can say, okay, I'd like to give up that property in the Shoreham Forest that I own, and instead I'll build in downtown Port Jeff, okay, where there's a receiving area. And who buys this? We don't buy anything.
Okay.
Okay. It's the county and the individual townships and the DEC for the state. It's not us.
Okay.
So we advocate for the properties that we're interested in, which is what we're doing now. We're interested in preserving another 3,800 acres. We were very successful. Our goals, we didn't set our goals high enough. How does that happen? We said we wanted to preserve at least 100,000 acres of Pine Barrens, and that seemed like pie in the sky. But we actually did that and more. And so we looked at the map carefully, and you have it back here.
Right.
Okay, and so we've preserved all that, so you can see we're over the 100,000. And then we said, okay, there are a few holes in this. There are areas that we should have included that weren't. They're either adjacent to something that is preserved, or that's usually the case. They're adjacent to something that is preserved, or they're adjacent to something that should have been preserved. And yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm going to ask for the audience, what's the difference between compatible and core?
Oh, yes, that's a very good question. Remember I mentioned that we had to make a deal?
Yep.
Everything is making a deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the core is the area that is most essential to be preserved, and building development is not permitted there at all unless there's an extreme hardship.
Okay.
So if an owner says, a landowner says, whatever, there's extreme hardship and public benefit if I did this, then there's a whole process that they must go through. The compatible growth area is what it says. It may be developed, but again, there has to be a reason why. They have to go through a whole process of justifying it, and it has to match what the area is like.
Okay. And with regard to that, does the society as an entity sit on those applications for those that want to develop? Right? Isn't there?
We wish.
Well, isn't there something that's filled out at the very
Yes,
least?
yes.
Yeah.
And it goes before the Central Pine Barrens Planning and Policy Commission. And we're not a member of the commission.
Okay.
But we attend all the meetings, and we monitor what it is that they do. Now, the composition of the commission is interesting. Most of the Pine Barrens is almost exclusively in Brookhaven, Riverhead, and Southampton towns. And so the supervisors of those towns sit on the commission.
As they change too, as they're
As
voted
they
in and out.
change,
They
yes.
they automatically get that seat.
They automatically get that seat. Then there's a county representative and a state representative.
Okay.
And right now the state representative slot is vacant, and so we're going to be advocating for somebody, because someone has to have more of a global picture.
Mm-hmm.
So but we're there to monitor what happens, and sometimes the decisions are not always what we would like to see happen.
Is there any other area in New York State that has the complexity of having the water underneath them supply so many people? Probably not, right?
Not really in New
Yeah.
York State, but there are other areas that
Right.
have pine barrens, like Albany Pine Bush up there.
Okay.
But we can look at Cape Cod. Cape Cod has this very similar situation to us. And also there's the Pinelands in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
another very similar situation. So we're unique, but not that unique.
And learn from each other?
We learn from each
I
other.
would think, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is here, we don't have mountains. So where are our rivers and where are our reservoirs? New York City gets their water from upstate, from reservoirs.
I know it well. The
using-
Pepecton.
Yeah, and the aqueduct system that's over 100 years old,
That's incredible.
but not us.
So they arguably, strangely enough, have it a little better than us in some ways.
In some ways.
In some ways, yeah.
Okay. The upstate folks would really argue with that,
yeah.
because they had to flood out some areas to create reservoirs.
Absolutely.
So that's that.
So I wanted to talk about Dick Amper, because he was my first introduction to the Pine Barrens Society through his tireless advocacy at civic meetings. And I remember this fiery man, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was so convicted to what we're talking about today. So I just wanted to give props to Dick. I haven't seen him in so many years, but early on in Shoreham Civic, for example, he really was very educated and very persuasive. So I always remember that. I hope he's well.
He is, and thank you for asking. He sends his regards to you as well,
Good.
and said this would be fine.
He gave it his.
He said this would be fine. Yes.
Good.
So
No, this is great. We're bringing it forward in such a way.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what's on the ballot. And I wanted to ask you, like, routinely are items put on the ballot? I mean, really what it comes down to, like you said, it's for deal making, right? I mean, we're asking for, what is the ballot really asking for in a sentence? It's coming up November 5th.
Right. And as I said earlier, we've advocated for a revenue stream for quite a while to deal with water quality.
Mm-hmm.
We have one for the Drinking Water Protection Program that allows for the purchase of land. However, that is set to expire in 2030. And while that sounds like it's far away, it isn't.
It's not.
Not with what you have to
Not
go
at all.
through to get something on a ballot in 2024 that will first take some time to implement, and then maybe 2025 or 26, so it's not far away at all. So right now, there's Proposition 2. It's not the first time we've tried something.
Mm-hmm.
And when I mean we, it's not just us, it's a collective we, those of us who are fighting for this continuous revenue stream. And so this year, you have a chance. It's called the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act. It's Proposition 2. You have to flip over your ballot. So that's the first thing in Suffolk County. People have to know to flip over the ballot and see what's there. And what this proposition will do, if passed, it will provide the money to extend the Drinking Water Protection Program, the land purchase, to 2060, which is a long ways out. And it will also provide additional monies, as I said before, for the alternative innovative systems that we want for cesspools and for sewers and for water reuse, which is an important concept. You know, every place, every business does not have to use fresh water for what it is that they do. So there are different types of reuse projects that can be instituted by government and by businesses. And some places have been doing this for a while, since the last legislation, like car washes.
I was just going to say
car washes, golf courses, so
Right.
things like that. So reuse is important too. And what's the cost? Nothing is free. And so the cost is simply a continuation of that 1/4% sales tax for the drinking water program, and an additional 1/8% of sales tax for the rest of it, which is nothing.
So let's break this down simply, because I do often think, I mean, I think a good thing is there's going to be a lot of people voting because it's a presidential election.
Right.
That's the good thing, right? So we want to break this down so they understand that, first of all, the reason for this is incredibly clear and incredibly important. We now, as Suffolk County residents, pay 1/4% out of the 8.75%.
1/4 cent, yes.
A 1/4 cent?
Yes.
Not a percent.
No.
That's nothing.
Yeah. So
But collectively it adds up.
it adds up. But to you as an individual going out and buying something, it doesn't matter at all. The same thing with the other thing. An eighth of a cent. What's that? Nothing. So you have to spend $1,000 for it to be anything. Right?
Okay.
So people have to understand that it's next to nothing for us to have clean, quality drinking water and
Till 2060.
surface water. Well, 2060 is for the Drinking Water Protection Program. So yes, I'm purchasing the land that will ensure that we have that, and then also the eighth of a cent will affect the allow us to build sewers where needed and have the continuing revenue stream because it's based on sales tax.
Okay. So, and again, it's small if I'm buying a candy bar, but the collective percentage of sales tax is part of this. Everything we buy is part of it.
Yes. And let's understand this too. We have a wonderful tourist industry, Port Jefferson. It's a tourist mecca here, and so we're charging visitors. So visitors who come and use our facilities and appreciate our beaches and our restaurants and so forth are also contributing to our well-being.
Right. Yeah, spoken simply, if we have, and we do, have a lot of New York City residents that come out to the Hamptons, what they spend would be part of that. But of course, they're enjoying that as well.
That's right. Just like when we travel to New York City, when we buy
Yes.
something there and we're paying for sales tax, or if we stay in a hotel, we're paying something toward that because we're using what they have.
Right. So, excellent. Restated Proposition 2 will be on the ballot November 5th, and I am advocating that we vote yes for that. Proposition 2. So Proposition 2 is on the back of the ballot, upcoming November 5th. It's coming right up, and we want to see that pass. So those of you that care about what we're talking about today, let's absolutely support this. Now, you do something yearly, and it brings people into not only education, but in celebration probably of what you've done. Explain that, the yearly gala.
Yes, every year we have an environmental gala, and for 25 years it was at a catering facility in Suffolk County, and it was quite a party.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever attended, but for anyone who did attend, they know that we put on quite a party.
Great.
But then, like everybody else, we were faced with the pandemic and the lockdown and what to do. And so, like everybody else, we pivoted to doing a virtual event. And so this year, for the first time, we are focusing on Best of the Rest with all new footage. Last year we did Best of the Rest, but it wasn't all new footage. This year we have all new footage, and we're highlighting what some of the properties that have been acquired, some that are still to be acquired, and some that are this close to being acquired. And we're showcasing property that Suffolk County is purchasing, Suffolk County a property that Brookhaven Town is purchasing, and property that DEC is
Wonderful.
working on. So we really want to thank those government agencies for working with us, and we think it's important to let people know. And there's a lot of content in this particular gala, so there's a lot of science and other content so that the public that view it can get a sense of why these properties are important. And of course, the drinking water issue is part of the discussion. And then at the end of the gala, we have a virtual silent auction, which is mimicking what we did at the actual event. And we have some really good things this year, and we're hoping that people will tune in on next week. It's next Thursday
It's
already.
Next Thursday. It's October 24th.
Actually, this Thursday, the Thursday that's coming, October 24th at 7 p.m. on our Facebook or YouTube channels.
Okay.
And they'll be able to watch the gala.
But they're registering, correct? Register to watch?
No, they don't have to.
Wow. Okay.
We try to make it easy because what we want to do is educate and inform.
Yes.
So people can just tune in
Okay.
and watch, but please stay online until the end so that you can get a preview of the silent auction. And then you just go to our website, and there you have to register for the auction.
Okay.
And
The highest bidder wins?
The highest bidder wins.
And there are items that are donated or in some cases purposely bought for the gala?
No, they're all donated.
Great.
We have wonderful donors who provide everything from fantastic foursome at a very exclusive golf club on Long Island to fantastic restaurants, one of which is here in town. I don't want to give too much away.
Okay. You have to tune in.
Cultural events across the island that are very interesting, and sporting events.
Excellent.
And sporting paraphernalia. And it's exciting. It's exciting. We always look forward to it, and we see which items are being bid against other people. So our system is such that you place a bid and someone outbids you, you're informed, and then you get to watch what happens.
You want that competitive aspect.
You get to watch what happens. And last year there was one particular item that kept changing hands right up until midnight, which is when we shut it down.
Okay.
So that was exciting.
Very, very cool. So you think maybe next year there's a chance you'd go back to these wonderful in-person events?
Yeah, the board is going to look at that in January and think about making a decision, because every year it's been, well, that we have a recurrence of COVID, and what should we do? And obviously, if we're going to hold an event in October, we have to know what we're doing no later than January, because we have to get the appropriate venue.
No doubt.
So
Gotta be ready
the
for it.
board will be holding a meeting then, and we'll be looking at that.
Great. So let's do something cool. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but we'll test our audience, make sure they were watching the whole segment here. Any idea of what 1 acre of Pine Barrens land saved ultimately produces in clean water per day, per year, per month? Has this ever been?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that question, because the U.S. Geologic Survey, which is a totally independent, federally funded organization, has done a study that says for every 3,000 acres, there's 1.7 billion, with a B, gallons of water saved.
Okay.
Okay, so our Best of the Rest campaign was looking at 3,800 acres, and so it would be more than 1.7, probably closer to 2 billion acres.
Incredible.
Gallons.
So that's going to be one of our test questions to make sure you've watched this whole segment. We'll give away something. We'll figure it out. Such a wonderful organization. Are there members that have annual dues as an option?
Well, we do have members. We don't set a level of dues, but we would hope people would contribute. And as long as they contribute $10, they are considered members, which gives them 2 newsletters a year mailed to their home. We might be changing that format and going to an electronic version.
Yeah. Not only save water, save paper.
Right. We'll still do some paper for those people who do not use the technology. And there are a number of people who don't. But we have a membership, a thriving membership of about 3,000 members.
That's big.
And that's big. And so they get email blasts about important events, important action alerts, like this Proposition 2 that we've been talking about. And certainly they know about the Gala, they know about those things coming up. And we count on them, because without our members, we don't survive. It's totally our members. And our membership has been with us all these years for the most part. And the public, who are these members? They're members of the public. That's who they are. And the members of the public throughout the years have supported the Drinking Water Protection Plan by a wide margin. You know, something over 80% every time that there's a vote. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's not too many things you can say that about.
No. So we are very thankful for our members and our sponsors for the Gala, our donors. And again, most of them have been with us year after year after year, going on over 20 years. People who donate the items for the silent auction. Most of those are recurring as well. So we are very, very appreciative of those who support us.
They're lucky to have you, Nina. They really are. I hope you stay at the helm. I know you'll be advocating no matter where you are. We thank you. The 2 dates we want everybody to remember is this Thursday, so we've got to get this right out. This Thursday, join on Facebook or YouTube the annual gala, virtual gala, on the Facebook page of the Pine Barrens would be best. Very easy. We'll put it up in the bottom of this segment as well. And secondly, I know you'll all be voting. Be sure to turn over the ballot at your local voting booths and vote Proposition 2. Vote yes. That's our take here at Long Island Talks. Nina, thanks for joining us today. This has been great. I really appreciate you coming out to Port Jefferson today.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.